Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump's 50% tariffs on India take effect as Modi promises tax cuts and urges support for Make in India. Meanwhile, Trump is holding a White House meeting on Gaza as new details emerge about a deadly hospital strike. And a shooting at a US school leaves 2 dead and dozens injured. Plus, pop star Taylor Swift has announced her engagement to NFL star Travis Kelce, sharing a heartfelt post that's already racked up 18 million likes. Now, Donald Trump's 50% tariffs on India have officially taken effect, hitting one of Washington's strongest Indo-Pacific partners and threatening millions of jobs in export-driven sectors. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is responding with promises of tax cuts and urging citizens to support Make in India as the country navigates the economic blow. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by correspondent and columnist Gemma and Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight. Shane, we know that these tariffs have taken effect, the additional 25% that Donald Trump was threatening. So the big question is, what impact is this actually going to have on the Indian economy?
Well, I've been watching a lot of interviews with Indian business on various sort of news shows throughout the day, and a lot of them were all saying that this is going to have a big impact, especially on sort of low cost and low margin industries, because it's basically going to impact things like sort of clothes, diamonds, and these kind of industries. And the US sort of India sort of goods and service trade is worth about 210 billion, so it's quite a substantial amount, and it has been going up sort of 8% last year. But the issue is, and this is the bugbear that Trump has with a lot of the countries, is that there's more goods going from India into the US than the opposite way around. So there's a big deficit, which is his sort of massive bugbear, and we're talking about like 45 billion. So it's quite a substantial difference. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the US accounts for only about like 2% of India's GDP. So if you look at any country around the world, if they knock off 2%, you'd be like, oh, they'll be fine. So India is going to survive, but what I think is quite unfortunate that it's, like I said, it's going to impact probably the poorest end of the employee sort of demographic in India, and those that are sort of in high-end industries like pharmaceuticals and electronics have been sort of fairly sort of exempt from this from the moment. And I looked up at the Indian Express, which is one of the local newspapers. They were predicting that US trade could actually drop by up to like 40–45% in the next sort of year. So yeah, it's going to have a huge impact, and unfortunately all of the companies that I've seen being interviewed were saying that they're already seeing the impact because they knew this was coming, and they were saying that the American buying public is not going to absorb this, so they'll either be forced out of the market, or they'll have to look at other markets like the UK, Europe, sort of the Middle East. But yeah, it is definitely going to have an impact.
Yeah, and it's been such an interesting conversation. But earlier I spoke to economist Laurie Laird about why India is continuing to buy crude oil from Russia. And here's what she had to tell me.
This is what I can't get my head around. I haven't found an economist who can get their head around this, because India isn't the only economy buying discounted Russian oil. Now, India is profiting to a certain extent. It's buying this cut price crude oil, putting it through its many refineries on Indian soil, and then distributing that domestically and selling it abroad. But India isn't, China is taking a lot of discounted Russian oil. A couple of years ago, the G7, and with America's consent, said Russia can sell as much oil as it wants at a price of $60 a barrel or lower. So everybody was in on this. And the reason for this was to avoid removing a whole lot of oil from the global markets, thereby pushing up the price of energy. Now, this is what really confuses me. India is buying about 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day. If India goes and seeks that oil elsewhere, and Russian oil at this point is not discounted by all that much, given the market price of crude, because crude prices have come down so much. But were that Indian demand to go somewhere else, we're going to see oil prices skyrocket, which is exactly what Donald Trump said he does not want.
So there is quite a lot to the story, and a lot of it was the fact that Donald Trump was putting this extra 25% tariff on India to almost punish Russia, to get Russia to the table over the war in Ukraine. But it's an interesting concept that China is buying more Russian oil, and of course the G7 did say Russian oil can be sold at a discounted price. And Modi's language and what he's been using, I feel like maybe there's more to this than what the eye can meet, Gemma.
Yeah, I mean, he's taken a very defiant stance, which I think is to be expected, because 50% tariffs, it's almost akin to like a sanction, you know, as opposed to these secondary tariffs. So, this week, the Minister of State for External Affairs, he called the tariffs totally unjustified and unfair. Now, this echoes what Modi has been saying over the past few weeks. He has said he's ready to pay a very heavy price for resisting these, what he sees as US attempts to almost bully them into the direction that the US wants them to go. Now, Modi has also sort of turned internally, and he's said in a speech, we should become self-reliant, and he used this phrase, economic selfishness. But he says they should become self-reliant, not out of desperation, but out of pride. So he is, you know, really kind of, he's looking to win hearts and minds in his nation over this. Now, I think what's interesting is the big focus has been on oil. It's been on the fact that India is still buying oil from Russia. And as we've said, but China is as well, but they've not had secondary sanctions. But Modi has also said it's not really about the oil. It's about the US wanting India to import genetically modified crops. And now that's not been a big story because it's been overshadowed by people talking about oil. And he said, absolutely not. We're never going to import those. And again, he appealed to Indian farmers. There are millions of Indian farmers, and they are very strong politically. They're very influential. So he's saying, we're not going to import these crops. So he's winning over agriculture in India. So it's interesting that it's not just the oil. There's this issue about crops as well.
But yeah, I think it is to do with oil in some respects. But the point towards the end that your economist made there about if Trump gets his way and India stops taking Russian oil, that the price will go up. I kind of don't agree with that in some respects, is because if you look at who India's second, third, fourth, fifth supplier is, it's Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and even the US, which is quite small, but which are all mainly part of OPEC, and they're going to agree to produce a lot more coming forward. So I think there was always that concern that if once they start pulling back and started producing a lot more and sort of open the taps, that then the price will go down. So I think those two conflicting things will then balance the price out. So I think that element is what I would disagree with her on. But Iraq is in desperate need of finance. So if that gets sort of a bailout, so to speak, from India, taking more from them, and then obviously then after that Saudi Arabia and UAE, which is our backyard, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So oil makes the world go around in this part of the world.
They've not said they're going to stop buying.
No, they haven't said that.
Um,
and they've stayed pretty steadfast in that. They said they're going to be doing what's best for the Indian economy.
Yeah, they said
what's best
which
for
you'd expect
wherever they get the best deal from, they said they will just continue to do so.
And we must remember the population of India is completely vast. And, oil is needed. It's needed to make sure the lights are still on. It's a huge part of the economy.
And even if Trump pushes this a lot, and like I said earlier, it's only 2% of the whole of GDP, but they get 40% of the oil from Russia. So I'd imagine in sort of New Delhi, they're doing the maths and go, okay, well, if we lose the trade but we're benefiting by getting cheap oil from Russia. And they can probably just go to Moscow and say, okay, give us an even better deal, to annoy Washington further if you so want to. But the only notice thing I did is when you look at the statistics is that India was increasing its oil, but it had started to decrease in recent months. So I think the sort of pushback is sort of working in some respects, and a lot of the analysts were saying that the sort of decline will continue into the rest of the year. So I think in some respects Trump's already putting in place policies that were already taking effect anyway. So I think they will buy Russian oil, but I think it will start to drop.
In the future. But it was so interesting because yesterday I was speaking to someone on this very topic, and I thought he brought up a really good point to me, Derek Grossman. He said to me, we've got to think about it in another way. He feels like this is personal because he feels like Donald Trump has come out time and time again and he said he stopped the tension between India and Pakistan, which could have been a nuclear war, and he stopped that. And he feels like Narendra Modi should have nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize and hasn't. So in many respects, this isn't just about Russia. He said it goes deeper. And also, if we look about the fact that, the talks have stalled in New Delhi because of their resistance to opening up the country's vast agricultural and dairy sectors. And because of that, US trade negotiations called off this planned trip to New Delhi this week. So some people are saying, actually, maybe it's more personal than we think, and this is the way that it's been dealt with.
Well, Trump does hold a grudge, we know this.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised because we've seen it in other parts of the world, like in Panama. Do you remember way back when Panama was in the news?
Oh my gosh,
that was such a long time ago, and that was the biggest thing. And then Greenland, and the Trumps have had dealings in Panama. There was unconfirmed speculation that it might be something personal as well. So I don't think it's unusual. And Trump has even said himself that he'll take revenge on his enemies. But then there's the question: if we can solve all of these wars, and the sort of way we can get around that is giving him a Nobel Peace Prize, would you like to see him get up on stage and accept it?
I think if that's the carrot that needs to be dangled in order for them to start solving things, by all means.
Yeah. I think just allow him to have it.
Yeah, he really wants it.
Us that he's brought 6 wars to an end. Just why not? Go on.
I think he'd be.
Do it for everyone.
If it works.
Now, moving on to another story coming out of the US today. President Trump will hold a large meeting on Gaza at the White House. So, Gemma, this is actually, I think maybe going ahead now as we speak, but this has been in the planning. I felt like we didn't really know about it, but Witkoff was speaking on Fox and Friends yesterday and giving an interview, and also Donald Trump had some comments in the Oval Office yesterday too. And according to Witkoff, they expect to settle this war between Israel and Hamas soon. Donald Trump said a very similar thing. Soon? Is that a bit much to hope for?
It's not really a fixed term, is it, soon? There is a sense that momentum is gathering. So on Monday, Trump said that Gaza will reach a conclusive ending in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's his favourite 2 weeks. He cites that time period quite a lot. On Tuesday, Witkoff said Washington expected it to be settled by the end of the year. And this was echoed again by Rubio. Now, I don't think it's realistic that things are going to be ended by the end of the year. And I guess that would depend on your definition of what ending the war actually means. If it means Israel out of Palestine, that is completely unrealistic. They are still talking about the evacuation, or as they say in the Times of Israel, the conquering of Gaza City. That doesn't appear to have been taken off the table. Hamas is not looking like they're going to, disappear off the planet, which again, Israel has always said eradicating Hamas is part of ending the war. The hostages are no closer to being released. So this talk of ending the war, I think it's kind of the wrong language. I think they should be using words like looking for the next solution or the next step, because I do believe this kind of language is giving false hope.
And I think a lot of what you said is also really true. Eradicating Hamas is almost impossible at this stage because it's ideological.
You can't eradicate an ideology or a thought or a movement. You just have to look at the Taliban to see that. You simply cannot. So, yeah, the word eradicate means obviously to wipe off the face of the earth, to wipe clean of all memory. It's simply not possible. So if you have this impossible goal, how can you ever say if you've achieved it or not?
And it's just one of those situations, isn't it, that we find ourselves in, and we find a lot of diplomatic talks happening.
Yeah.
And also, what is actually interesting, I've got a few breaking lines coming through here. There's a UN Security Council that's been held today alongside this White House gathering, which apparently Tony Blair and Jared Kushner will be attending. But all UN Security Council members, except for the US, have said Gaza famine is a man-made crisis. All UN Security Council members, except for the US, warn use of starvation as weapon of war is banned under international humanitarian law. So I think this is the situation we're getting into. How far does Israel need to go for the US to actually act?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question, and you kind of wonder, what do the Israelis have on Trump or something? Is there some video somewhere?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense. And they were saying, it doesn't adhere to international humanitarian law. I don't think Israel cares about international law. I think that's been sort of proven over the last sort of 22 months, and the 62,000 people that have been killed. So I don't think they're going to worry. They don't seem to care what sort of the allies think, what the EU thinks, the UN thinks. So I don't think that over in Israel, they're going to be worrying about this at all.
But do you think that, we've seen these huge protests and demonstrations, but within Israel then itself, we've seen this yesterday, it was in Tel Aviv, it was in Jerusalem, it's spread to other cities now. And do you not think that Israel itself and the US are realising, gosh, there's this growing momentum from the grassroots at home, from the hostages' family, and also from Western traditional allies?
Yeah, possibly. I think the things that will only sway it possibly is if you see American bodies coming back to the US for, if they're killed in Israel or in, different parts of the world. That's the only thing I can sort of see is that would sway the MAGA sort of vote in the US, and that Trump will then sort of look at and see, okay, but I think, I don't know, A, how that would happen, and B, if it would have that much effect. But I think it is sort of wondering, like, how far do you have to go before the US is going to intervene? And the fact that they've even objected to these latest UN sort of resolutions that the rest of the allies have come together with. And I don't know how you could say that this is not a man-made famine. You just need to look at your eyes and look at the TV and see what's happening. So it's an extremely good question about how far can Israel go before the US says enough is enough.
We just saw a hospital being struck, didn't we, twice, and 20 people dead, 4 or 5 journalists and the rest patients, and one would think, oh, that's the step that's going to, just be too far, and it's not.
But then I think we were saying that in the White House, as part of this comprehensive plan that the Trump administration has put together, which we don't know what is comprehensive about this plan, but we're looking at some of the previous remarks in February, it was to basically move the Palestinians out, and then we'll have the Gaza Riviera and all those pictures that we saw as well. But the problem is where there's those 2 million sort of Palestinians go. Do they go into the rest of the Middle East, which a lot of the Middle Eastern countries don't want? Do they go to Germany and the UK? There seems to be issues with that at the moment as well.
Yeah, there's issues with UK immigration as well. I think Trump was very surprised that the Middle Eastern nations were not prepared to suddenly take 2 million refugees. I think he sees it as one big homogenous area. The way they talk about Europe now as if it's just one big country. They tend to talk about Africa as if it's a country. I think they were quite surprised that people weren't going to throw open their doors.
That was the stumbling block. So I think that's the part of the comprehensive plan that is maybe not as comprehensive as he probably would like.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is, we also have to just think of the situation with the hostages, because that has been a major sticking point in any ceasefire deal that we've seen. Hamas have signed the latest ceasefire deal on the table. Israel wants all the hostages home. as they're changing, the boundaries have been changed. But it's also really interesting because today at the UN Security Council meeting, they actually heard from a freed hostage, and she had spent 50 days under Hamas captivity, and just spoke about the horror that was felt from that side and from the 7th of October. So, in many respects, I think Israel is saying, we've got to defend our borders, we can't let this happen again. So that is their rhetoric that we obviously have to respect and listen to what hostage families and freed hostages are saying. But I think a lot of the world is now also thinking, what can we do? And of course, Shane, the Pope, we've heard from the Pope, he's spoken out before. Madonna's even called for the Pope to go. I mean, how much influence does the Pope have? Because we've heard from the UN, haven't we? We've heard from just everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think I had to look this up. This is Pope Leo XIV. My Roman numerals are not as good as they used to be, but it's the 14th anyway. And he's the first American Pope. So you could think maybe he'll have some sway, but unfortunately, I think the Pope is kind of like the British monarch, where it's ceremonial and it's really, really nice. But in terms of power, I think we're talking like a century ago. I'm an Irish Catholic. I think the popes are all great. I remember Pope John Paul II when he came to Ireland. It was all great, but I don't think anyone really takes what that comes out of the Vatican quite seriously anymore, in terms of it's going to sway the 1.whatever billion Catholics to suddenly change. And I don't think Israel is going to be shivering in their boots when thinking, oh, the Pope has said that, we have to go and do something. And I think he's a nice old man, and he can sort of do mass and stuff like that. But I don't think anyone is really going to take his words as seriously as maybe the rest of the world thinks they will.
I guess his words make headlines, don't they, of course, because he's made a statement, but whether there's anything behind it that will be a call to action. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I don't think, I think it's very much a sort of symbolic role. For example, like when he came to Abu Dhabi and he met up with other sort of religious leaders. And I think maybe if he got together with sort of like a high-profile rabbi and they were seen to have sort of discussions and there was some sort of call, then that would be a more powerful sort of visual. But I don't think Israel has proven that it doesn't really care what international organizations or the Vatican or anyone thinks. I think the only thing that Israel really cares about is what Donald Trump thinks, and that is the biggest swear in the. So if he changes opinion, then we might have to go back to the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
But you know what I find interesting about Pope Leo? Just a quick note before we end the conversation. He said the Vatican can be a neutral place for Zelensky and Putin to meet in the talks, and then he's actually come out and spoken about Israel to,
Well, there was that famous scene with Zelensky and Trump at the Pope Francis funeral, which was quite... So that could be a breakthrough. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if they get into the Vatican, you might be thinking, right, peace, love, and all of that.
But I do think he's quite an interesting Pope for his political stance. He's spoken out a few times. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And a Wisconsin man has been sent to jail after faking his own death so he could meet a woman in the country of Georgia. Before disappearing, he took out a life insurance policy and applied for a replacement passport. Well, Shane, I mean, whoa.
This is brilliant.
I feel like, why just not tell somebody you might be leaving them for someone else? He's made quite the journey.
Yeah, so this is Ryan Borgwart, which is probably not how you pronounce it. He's 45, and then so on August 12th last year, he went to Green Lake, which is about 100 miles northwest of Milwaukee. Anyway, it's been a long day. But anyway, so what he did was, so then he overturned his kayak, got out into the lake, and then he had an inflatable raft, which he then used to get to shore. Then he cycled in an electric bicycle, which is an important detail, I think, 70 miles to nearby Madison, then went on a bus from Madison to Toronto, then went for a plane from Toronto to Paris, then went to Asia, then ended up in Georgia, and then he met this woman. So this must be some woman that he went to all of this trouble to.
It's quite a journey.
Wow.
It is quite a journey.
70 miles on an electric bike is a very long way.
Do you not have to recharge it?
You have to pedal, don't you?
Oh, you have to pedal if it runs
alternate,
out.
Yeah.
You probably had to alternate and pedal and alternate and pedal. But I mean, who is this woman? Where did he meet her? What more do we know about
Yes, Gemma,
her?
tell us all.
Yes, because, I mean, he left a family, essentially.
He's a married man, as you said. He's got 3 children. He met an Uzbekistani lady online. Now, she's not been revealed. We don't know who she is. But what we do know is he went above and beyond for this, what we presume is a relationship that he was pursuing. So he got his new passport. He got life insurance. He transferred a lot of money overseas. This is possibly my favourite part of it. He had his vasectomy reversed, so clearly he had some hopes of perhaps starting a new family, and then he faked his own death. Prior to that, he had done online research about how to fake a drowning. And he'd specifically chosen Green Lake because it's about 100 feet deep, and he thought a body would not surface there, because that was one of the reasons why the police started investigating, because no body appeared, which on a lake they would usually presume it was. Surely setting up a Tinder profile would have been a lot easier than all of that, honestly, even if you were cheating on your wife, which is obviously very unfortunate. But yes, we don't know much about the woman, but, you know, she must be the Uzbekistani, like Liz Taylor or something. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, who was the lady who launched 1,000 ships? The most
Helen of Troy.
Helen of Troy,
yeah, maybe she... But what I find really fascinating, do you think that when this lady met him in Georgia, she'd think, oh, gosh, this is a bit of a red flag? You know, he's made this huge journey.
He's faked his own death to be with me.
There'll definitely be, I think, a Netflix or a podcast or a YouTube thing from this anyway.
Yes.
Because so I wonder, is like, we've all gotten those sort of emails from, you know, Nigerian widows of every single leader ever who've got millions who want to send to your account, and all they need is your bank details. So I don't know if there was some sort of con in it, or maybe it was just true love over the internet.
Yeah. But tell us a little bit about the jail time and what he's going to serve, because, you know...
89 days he got.
But is that how long he was actually missing
that's
for?
the amount of time the judge said he had wasted law enforcement's time, because that's the amount of days they
spent 89 days looking and searching for
So
him.
he actually did quite a good job at disappearing.
Well, the prosecution as well, they wanted 45 days, but the judge was like, no, 89, we're gonna double this. They spent about 30,000. Well, he's got to pay back $30,000 in restitution, because you think, you know, the money they spent, the
time
the
they
manpower,
wasted.
the time, and a wife and children who believed that their husband and their father was dead.
I know. And then when he came back, she divorced him, surprise, surprise.
She did.
I don't blame the poor wife.
Thank goodness for that.
I quite like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing about it is she filed for divorce, but no wonder. But I just want to remind you of a story that I remember. And as soon as I heard this, I thought about the John Darwin case. Do you remember that case, the British man's disappearance? And that was with the kayak too. Yeah. But what always fascinated me about that case, it was actually a long time ago that happened. It was actually 2002, but there was a big ITV documentary on it, which I watched. Yeah, but he faked his own death, but was actually living next door to the family home where his kids and wife were. For very many years until they found out. And I
wasn't his wife in on it? Was she?
She was in on it.
Yeah, it was a life insurance scam.
And then they went to Panama.
They went to Panama, and then there was a photograph of them taken, and so the story transpired. But I just think, gosh, that is. You know, it's just so fascinating, the lengths that people go to. And that was for life insurance. And at the time, they got paid out £250,000 in life insurance. But the kids have spoken out since and said how traumatic it was. They thought their dad had died. You know, but the whole time the mum was in on it. So it's fascinating what people do. But why always a kayak?
Must be a lot of kayaking in. I guess they're literally hoping that it will be a cause of death, drowning, even without the body.
You don't know where the body is.
Yeah, exactly. And that was on a river, and so you can float down that. But obviously in a lake, you know, you don't really have anywhere to go.
But fascinating. I mean, I've got to give it to him, an A for effort when it comes to love.
Why he came back to the US as well? Because he must have known that he was going to be convicted, would get divorced and all of that. So
we're not sure if he was betrayed by the woman, because a Russian-speaking woman phoned the US authorities, and she connected them with him. So we don't know if
we have to wait for the podcast.
Yeah, if she told on him, or if he was ready to come home.
So we're going to move on to another story now, and it's actually not about divorce. Taylor Swift is officially off the market. The pop star announced her engagement to NFL star Travis Kelce, sharing a heartfelt post that's already racked up over 18 million likes. Social media erupted with fans cheering and getting emotional over the couple's news. And I can't actually tell you how happy I was, because I'm a massive Taylor Swift fan. I've loved her since her country music. And obviously, so much hype around the engagement, the wedding. I can't wait for it. They've been, the US royals. This is who it is. So are you surprised that fans just went sort of a little bit starstruck crazy?
I am not surprised in the slightest. I have friends who are very, very excited about this news, so I've seen it firsthand. People feel like it's their best friend who's got engaged. She has that type of relationship. Yeah. I'd say there's a lot of parasocial relationships that go on between Taylor Swift and her fans, but she has cultivated that every step of the way. She's very open with her fans. Her albums, as we know, are diaries. The insight, as soon as an album is released, people are poring over the lyrics to find out who that person is and this person. So, and the whole time she has actively encouraged that. She's never been one to pour her heart out in an album and then say, no, but I want my privacy. And I think that's really important in this day and age. She lives a very public life, and this has been a very public relationship and a very public engagement. And I think it's interesting you called them American royals, because I do think America's been looking for a long time for someone to step into that Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, JFK Jr. role. They want these icons, and they kind of fit perfectly. You've got the girl next door and the sports jock. It writes itself practically. Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more, because I love the caption that she put. She said, your English teacher is marrying your gym teacher. Yes. And I thought that's just so perfect. But also the fact it's sort of that American dream. She's a Southern girl who essentially wrote music really into country, and she meets the all-star sportsman, and it's like a lovely love story, and they both just love each other for who they are. And he embraces all of Taylor's fame and, what she loves to share. But I also just think we have a golden thread always running through our show, and it's Donald Trump. Yeah. And even Donald Trump actually was asked about it in the Oval Office last night when there was a really serious meeting. They interrupted him to say breaking news.
Just the fact that that's stopped, probably, I know, maybe they're talking about Ukraine, thought let's stop to go to Taylor Swift. And he did say, I wish them a lot of luck. I think he's a great guy, and I think that she's a terrific person, which was quite shocking in itself, because he's only back in May, he said that I hate Taylor Swift in capital letters. Yes. And he said she's no longer hot and the tide has seriously turned. And he's previously said that he's not a Taylor fan and that she'll probably pay a price for it on the marketplace, while at the same time, that didn't happen because she's been declared the richest female musician ever just this week. And also, I think her new album, The Life of a Showgirl, will probably do okay.
I think it's going to be a great album.
It's going to be a smash hit.
But I just wonder about this, because, I've always listened to Taylor Swift's album, and I love the songs that she writes about the makeups and the breakups, but really, the interesting one, like she had one in the latest album called The Smallest Man That Ever Lived, about Matt Healy, and I thought that was just the ultimate diss track. If you ever break up with someone, just basically call him the smallest man that ever lived. But my big question is, like, creativity. Now that you get married and you're happy, you mentioned Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, she had the best breakup album probably ever in
Ironic.
Exactly.
Jagged Little Pill, the album.
Best album.
I love that in the 90s, and we still don't really know who he was. But you're right. And then remember, there was all that stuff about maybe when Adele got married and got happy.
Oh
yes.
So there is some merit in it, but I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. But like, we will have the wedding album probably, because I don't think she'll get married for like a year maybe or 6 months. So she can churn out another album. I think it's going to
be sooner rather than later.
The papers were saying that they think it'll be for the end of the year, which possibly. She's a billionaire. You can turn around a wedding in probably no time. But then
we won't be seeing protests either, like we did with Bezos. I'm sure there will be people.
Oh, there definitely won't be that.
I think it'll be a much smaller, intimate wedding, like in.
Oh no! I hope it'll be like in the Vatican with the Pope.
No.
We could get Zelensky, Putin.
They would turn
together.
up. They would.
Oh no, but then she'll get the Nobel Peace Prize, and Trump will never.
Trump would hate her again.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what do you think about her creativity? Does love stifle creativity, or does it make you just a little bit more mature?
That's really interesting because I remember when Beyonce wrote Lemonade, that was about troubles in her relationship, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But she has produced incredible albums when she's happy with
Yeah.
Jay-Z. So I think when you're writing a happy album, you've got to just write bangers and disco hits and like amazing songs like that, as opposed to gushing about how in love you are. Because we love Taylor, but no one really wants to hear that. You know, there's a lot going on in the world, Taylor. We're happy
kind of
for
like
you.
Shake It Off, Blank Space. What's the one? He's Trouble or something. They're all like.
I knew you were in trouble.
None of those are kind of lovey-dovey.
No, they're not.
But then over 50% of marriages end in divorce in the US. So.
Well, you know what? I really hope that this marriage works out for her, only because, Taylor Swift, I look at her and I spoke to a Swiftie fan earlier and they said Taylor Swift feels like our older sister.
Yes.
She's someone who I don't think ever has had awful scandals about her. Yes, maybe criticism for her relationships, but, she's quite a sort of solid role model for many girls and many young women. Taylor Swift, she talks about who she is. She's been a fantastic businesswoman. I don't know.
Oh yeah, she's like I said, the wealthiest.
I wish her all the best in a marriage, because I think she's actually a good person to look up to.
She's very savvy as well. Like I don't think she gets the credit. I mean, she's an incredible singer-songwriter, but the savvy way she has negotiated fame, going from country to pop, that's not easy, because country is very territorial. Once you're gone, you're kind of
look at
dead
Beyonce
to them.
trying to break
into
country.
Exactly. There was the altercations online with Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. That went on for a very long time, and she emerged from that.
That's true, yeah. And then when she bought back the rights or remade them,
she took on Scooter Braun and
very smart. So I think
she's very smart. Yeah.
I think though that level of intensity and could be stifling for a relationship. But I think, like you said, all of that she's gone through. I think she does seem like someone who has her head screwed on and has already gotten through all of that level of vitriol that comes with sort of fame and fortune. But then it's not just her that we got to consider. It's him as well, and how he can cope with being in a relationship.
He's totally along for the ride.
The eyes of the world on it, and have they got a prenup? I don't.
That's the main thing.
We would assume we've just talked about how savvy she is. Yeah, she's not going to get married without a prenup.
So let's move to the part of the show that I love, because Gemma and Shane, you've chosen some stories. I wonder if the prenup will be in the Guinness World Records. Could be the biggest prenup ever. But tell us about the Guinness World Records, because it's actually turned 70, and
today,
to celebrate it, 70. I can't believe it. So 70 years we've had these records, and to celebrate, it's highlighted some unclaimed titles that maybe people should give a go. Why not? Yeah,
so you could have, these haven't been done, which kind of surprised me. The most whoopee cushions sat on in 1 minute. The fastest time to blow a stamp, 10 metres. The furthest distance bottle flip. I don't know what a bottle flip is, but we'll come back to that. The most high fives in 30 seconds. I quite like that one. Have we got 30 seconds? No, we don't. The fastest 400-metre sack race, and the fastest time to ascend Everest on a bicycle.
But you could die doing that because of altitude problems. So I don't know if the Everest one is a wise one.
That's quite a tricky one.
Yeah, I think
we could do the high fives and the whoopee cushion.
And the sack race.
Yeah,
but I think like the Everest one, maybe you might not have much left by the end.
No, but I quite like that it's 70 years today because it actually started right in the town where I grew up.
That's amazing.
Or Castlebridge in County Wexford in Ireland. And
it's basically the person who owns the Guinness brand who started this, right?
Yeah, they were shooting birds on a stage, very down with the people. And they were like, what is the fastest game bird in Europe? And they said, if only there was a place you could look up a list of records. So then someone said, that sounds like a great idea. They started the book, and now it's sold probably like about 150 million in 40 countries. And I would say it's still going relatively strong. Do you remember the BBC show with record breakers is coming back? So I think there's still interest in being record breakers.
And also, I wonder if this could have broken any records. Corgis. Tell us about yours, Gemma.
Corgis.
Little corgi doggies, and they're competing for titles in Lithuania.
This is Lithuania's annual corgi race, which I was not aware of until today, but now obviously I'm completely obsessed. It's in its 5th year, and it involves 120 teams. So this is massive. This is happening in Lithuania, and I had no idea. Teams from Poland, Latvia, Germany, Austria and Italy, and they compete in the solo sprint. There's best dressed, there's mightiest voice. So we've got corgis running around dressed up as Batman, dressed up as princesses. A corgi named Amigo won best dressed, being dressed up as a fur factory with little chimneys as well. So the attention to detail, you have to respect him. And another called Mango won the solo race. There they go, look at them go. Now, I didn't know as well, corgis are herding dogs. So they have an insane amount of energy, as we can see. But it's a bit of joy, really. I think it's so joyful. Beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, do you know what? Just a little bit of knowledge. Do you know what corgi means in Welsh? Because they're Welsh dogs.
No, tell.
It means small dog. Because, you know, obviously corgi was Welsh, so I know that... but they are gorgeous little things.
It's a bit of fun, love it.
And of course, the Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah,
she loved her corgis.
It's good that the corgis haven't sort of gone into history now that the Queen has gone. That they're still living on strongly in Lithuania.
Look at this little plane.
Here we are. Here's best dress. Well, here's the fancy dress competition.
Oh, wow.
It's comedy gold.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. What a nice story to end on. Everyone just loves dogs. You know, what would we do without a Rastafarian dog there? And that's all we've got time for tonight. Thanks to today's guests, correspondent and columnist Gemma White and Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you for tuning in.